Corporation, a think tank of global policy and a contributor to foreignaffairs.com. He joins me now from Washington for some perspective on the challenge this presents for the Communist Party leaders in Beijing. Hi there, thanks so much for joining us. What are the options for China here? Do they want to continue to wait for these protests to fizzle out, crack down, or do you actually think China might pressure CY Leung to resign?
I don't think that it's likely that China is going to pressure CY Leung to resign right now. Beijing does not immediately have an interest in trying to use force either. I think, in fact, in many ways, China is stuck in a problem that it has created through a very hardline approach. It has essentially defined any candidate who is not handpicked by Beijing as inherently threatening to China, which is not necessarily the case. I think what we're really seeing in Hong Kong now is that a movement that was about one issue, how do you select the candidates for 2017, has now morphed into a movement that is focused on two separate issues. One is the issue of 2017, but also you now have overlaying that the issue of the CY Leung administration's decision to press the police to use tear gas. And so really they're gone from one target, the NPC, the National People's Congress Standing Committee's decision on how to run 2017 elections, to two targets, the CY Leung administration. The immediate focus is going to be on trying to force the CY Leung government to have CY Leung step down. And that's what students have called for over the last 24 hours.
Is it also about Xi Jinping, a man who's tightened control internally? Compromise is not really part of his repertoire, is it?
No, I think, if you look at what Xi Jinping is trying to do, he's going after the most corrupt elements within the domestic security apparatus, the secret police, and also within corruption within the military. And from his perspective, I think it makes sense to say, well, if I'm going to go after these very tough, very corrupt forces inside China, I can't open up any avenue of criticism that I'm being too weak on territorial integrity, the rule of the party, or in other cases, for example, vis-a-vis Japan, the Philippines, India, Vietnam, even the United States, any perception that, well, you're being too weak on foreigners, that could be very dangerous for him and for the people who are surrounding him, who are trying to carry out these purges within China.
Because a lot of this has been contextualized or compared to Tiananmen. I mean, is that helpful?
No, I think that in many ways, 1989 and 2014 are extremely different contexts. Hong Kong is not calling for the democratization of the mainland. They're simply asking the government in Beijing to live up to the promises that it made in a bilateral treaty with Britain when it received Hong Kong from the UK. They're not directly challenging the ruling status of the Chinese Communist Party on the mainland, and it's a mistake for Beijing to define what they are seeing in Hong Kong as a threat to the mainland. Now, however, there is a threat directly to CY Leung personally, and I think that it may become the case over time, although not immediately necessarily, that challenge may be so great that he either is forced to step down or that Beijing decides it would be better off with a replacement for CY Leung who's not so toxic to the Hong Kong people. Right now, people all across Hong Kong are very angry at CY Leung. He enjoys zero credibility with the average Hong Konger, and it's very hard to see how he can serve the remaining 3 years of his term in office with any kind of effective capacity to govern Hong Kong.
I think what's also interesting listening to the protesters, it sounds like a lot of these protests are also a symbol of a deepening of a Hong Kong identity, a reluctance for people to see themselves perhaps as Chinese or part of the Chinese mainland. That's even harder for China's political masters to change or influence, isn't it?
Well, they've tried to influence it. In fact, in the early part of this decade, they tried to push through a movement that would increase national education in Hong Kong's educational curriculum. That actually gave rise to the movement known as scholarism, the young leaders of which are, in fact, at the forefront of the current efforts to try to press the government in Beijing and the government in Hong Kong to change their decisions about how to handle 2017 and how to handle street protests. The young leaders of that movement are in their mid to late teenage years and are already demonstrating greater political savvy in many ways than either CY Leung or Xi Jinping in Beijing. They obviously don't have as much power, raw power, but they certainly have the emotional and moral support of the vast majority of Hong Kongers as well as the international community. And so Beijing trying to encourage people in Hong Kong to think of themselves as Chinese by pushing them to do so instead of luring them, making it attractive, has essentially created opposition where it may not have existed.
Thank you so much, Scott Harold from the RAND Corporation and ForeignAffairs.com. Really appreciate your analysis. A fatal shelling